Hi all, time for another update on the Sling TSi build. Working on the center fuselage and also some little bit about the avionics that I have in mind for this aircraft. So I've been working on the fuselage section, continued with the rudder pedal installation. Pretty straightforward. The instructions in the manual are quite good. I haven't hooked up the cable or the push rods yet, but it seems to be, everything came quite well lined up, and it's quite a smooth operation of the pedals. The center fuselage side skins have dimpled all the holes on the skins, and that's ready to be installed, but I'm not planning to do that until I have my finishing kit. So I worked on some of the other aspects which can be done independently. So I worked on both the front seats. Again, this one's pretty straightforward. The instructions are quite good, and this is a new version of the seat. As you've probably seen in the Sling TSi, there's a new version of the front seats, and also the rear benches are pretty straightforward to work on. On the front seats, the only tricky bit was the position of the split pin in the mechanism, in the release mechanism. That's not shown in the manual, but once you try it out, you would know how to engage that, the spring. So that was a little bit of solving a puzzle, but it was done, and the mechanism works quite well now. Yeah, with that installed, I did also finish the couple of rivets on that back row before I could test fit the rear seats. So I didn't go for the split seat option. This is one of the earlier kits, so it's just a standard bench, two-seat bench. It rests quite nicely on these two end stops on the rear fuselage, and there's a sliding mechanism there which is riveted on once the upholstery is done. On the bottom, I need to figure out exactly where the bolts would go, but again, it's all riveted. I probably would paint it before putting the upholstery on. Now you can see the amount of luggage space and that luggage extension box. What about how much useful luggage space there will be. I couldn't test fit the front seats because the seat channels are not riveted yet. The other thing with this area is obviously I've yet to receive the finishing kit with all the control linkages, and that'll be quite tricky to assemble with the side skins on, so I'm leaving the side skins out for now until I have that. I'd also noticed an error on my position of that elevator autopilot bracket, which is upside down, so I just corrected that as well, drilled it out and installed it the right way. So those were the few things worked on the fuselage. While trying to figure out all these little side channels on the center fuselage, I test fitted just one side to see if I have all the right parts and if anything needs, because there are some of the parts would need dimpling. Most of it comes dimpled from the factory, these channels, but the top one and the bottom one, I think there is where it meets that front floor section, there are a few holes that needs dimpling. But the fits seem to be quite good. Again, I made also made a mistake of mixing on my left and rights and click code the wrong parts initially, but then had to take everything down and put it back. Because it's after a certain point you can see, you can easily identify mistakes, and this section that's marked out here is where there's another reinforcement plate that goes, so just to remind myself that I shouldn't rivet that section without that being there. The alignment to the rear fuselage is pretty good, and I probably use fuel tank sealant along that edge. I think that's for what the factory does. I think it's while joining the two halves. and the wooden bits in between replicating the wing spar width, that's quite key as well to maintain that, so that I don't rivet them too close or too far apart. Again, I've got to once the check with the wing, all the wiring, how they're going to route the pitot lines, the fuel lines, all of that before doing the final riveting of this section. And I think you can see from here I've still got to get into those aileron autopilot bracket push rods, and also the linkages for the aileron and the elevator, and working from the top from this angle would be quite difficult, so I'm glad I haven't done the side skins on. Okay, so I wanted to talk about my panel layout. I'm about to finalize the panel and get Midwest Panel Builders the okay to start building the panel. So essentially this is what I'm going with, my layout, and I'll just try and briefly walk you through what the logic behind and what it will be capable of. So I'm having a single G3X screen, 10-inch screen, PFD on the left. I've included all the Rotax lane switches and everything on the left. There'll be the usual bank of switches below that. In the center stack there'll be the G5. On the glare shield on the top there's a compass. Just below that will be the G5. On the left is the prop controller, and on the right I've just gone with a slip indicator, a simple mechanical slip indicator just under the Sling TSi logo, just to maintain that symmetry. And the stack below that would be the radio. I'll go in detail of that. Radio, transponder and autopilot controller, and the heater and the cabin ventilation knobs below that. In the middle there'll be one toggle switch for the prop, coarse and fine. The one below that would be the flap switch, again a toggle switch, and then there will be a go around button. On the right side pretty much nothing, just a glove box and all the circuit breakers in two banks, and possibly have a mount for an iPad just above that glove box. So that's the setup, and just focus on that center stack and just let you know why I went with this layout mainly and what it will be capable of. So essentially, for the plan is to get this aircraft to be IFR approved, or the day VFR limitation lifted by the LAA, possibly a year later. I think it needs to be flown for at least a year before that can be done, but obviously when that happens I need to be capable. So we need one, so I'm going with this GNC255A COM and nav radio. So it'll be a single COM and single nav radio, and then below that is the GNX375, which is a transponder with ADS-B in and out, plus it's also a GPS navigator with post GPS, and the autopilot controller bit below that, which has got that dedicated heading bug and altitude bug, which altitude knob, which is great, and the GMC 507. In terms of once approved, it will be capable of any GPS based approaches. I'm not IFR certified, so I don't know. I've heard LPV, RNAV, all these other terminologies I've heard, which I'm looking forward to doing all that training. And also because I've got the nav radio, I can use VOR ILS approach as well, because that can be displayed either on the PFD or on the G5 base using the input from the nav antenna and through this nav radio. There will also be a IBBS battery backup system, which will be the primary backup should the engine fail, or if the generators, which will integral to the Rotax assembly, stop working. Again, I think that gives about 45 minutes of backup, and if that fails, there's also a backup on the G5, which is a backup instrument to the PFD. That's got a 30-minute or a reserve on it. So in terms of, I think, the LA approvals, the key thing is electrical systems. I think that's what they're hot on. and having adequate redundancies for all the electrical systems. I think with the battery backup and the G5 battery, I should have covered that enough. Magnetometer, I think again there needs to be redundant source for the heading. So I've got a GMU11 which powers most of the instruments, and if that fails, the backup is the compass, mechanical compass. The GSU25, which is the 8 unit that powers the G3X and all the other units, the backup to that is the G5 has a input as a backup 8 hours, and should the PFD fail, the G5's backup, and and if there's plenty of redundancy in that respect. Plus the radio, even though I've got one radio, even if the PFD fails, I can still control, because it's panel mounted, I can still access the radio through that. Plus possibly might have to carry a handheld radio as backup, just for safety purpose. So that essentially is what I'm hoping for. The LA would be okay with lifting the day VFR limitation once the aircraft has got to a year. So I don't want to make any further changes. The rest of it, in terms of alternate pitot source, the heated regulated pitot tube, all of that have already been built into the wing and the fuselages as I've been building the aircraft. So I don't see any further issues. Again, this is all new. I'm only gathering information from what I've could get. If anyone has better understanding of the what the requirements are, particularly with the LAA and the UKCA in terms of lifting these day VFR limitations, if you could let me know, that would be great. But yes, so that's essentially a summary of the of my avionics setup. Again, there are different ways of achieving the same. Either you could go with a GTN 650, which combines all the radios and the GPF navigator into one unit, but this one is a slightly cheaper option. It would have been even more cheaper if it would have been based in the US, where I could go with basically just a comm radio, a GTR, a remote mount comm radio. Fortunately, Garmin doesn't do one with the 8.33 kilohertz spacing, which is a shame. So it takes up panel space, the 8.33 kilohertz spacing radio. So because I have to do that radio anyway, the cheapest option is the GTR 225, and the cost difference between the GNC and the GTR is not that much, and plus you get this VOR capability, VOR and ILS. So yeah, I thought it's worth having, and plus, since I need to train myself towards an IFR rating, so having all of that, I think I should be able to get myself trained on this aircraft. I think the other thing I need to look into is the LAA pilot coaches scheme, where they have dedicated instructors who can, and I had a look initially, and there doesn't seem to be that many LAA coaches who can train on for your IF towards your IFR rating. So that'd be a tricky thing, but it's at least a couple of years away, so we'll find someone by the time. But yeah, that's essentially the summary.